The Virtual Innovation Centre is the new initiative that we're launching to try and harness the power of that ecosystem and join it together to say, how do we support companies who've got up and running and started, but now really can accelerate that growth and success? So without more from me, I'm sure you're keen to hear more about the program itself, and then the panel discussion, which I'm delighted we've got such an esteemed panel to share their views on how such an initiative can maybe help address some of those. So from me, I'm delighted so many can join us and hear the launch, and I'll hand over to Aline to take you through the whole thing. Thank you.
And thank you, Tony. And whilst I'm sharing my screen to show you this very short presentation, you probably noticed it's a rather large meeting. So if you could just remain on camera for the time of meeting and then panel discussion, I think that will make it much clearer. And also taking the opportunity to actually just run through the housekeeping rules, because it's a good timing to do it when you are putting your screen and your camera and your presentation on. Off we go. So camera, microphone off. I'm going to run through this virtual innovation presentation before we get into the discussion on the challenges of growing your company. If you have any questions, comments, obviously the chat box is the best place to pass them on, and then they will be passed to the chair. So thank you, Tony, for the kind introduction. And before we get into the very insightful panel discussion, here is my opportunity to tell you how can this Virtual Innovation Center help you in growing your company to scale up success. So first question, why a Virtual Innovation Center? Why another initiative on top of the one already existing? Well, it's a combination of two things. First, sort of market observation and seeing lots of biotech companies in our network maturing, especially the ones who went through accelerator program or entrepreneur programs. And with maturing comes lots of new set of challenges, becoming more operational, as well as thinking about your strategic development, but also maybe, I wouldn't say less support available, but maybe less structured support or less clarity on how to access them, and maybe a different development of them having more personal needs. And so having less clarity on how they can access these programs, and one size fits all may be less relevant for them as well. But it's also combined with a reflection on the One Nucleus offer that you may be aware of is a combination of support on the people element, so supporting with talents or recruitment, technology and finding technology partners, but also on the money end and connections and access to capital, and also on the saving end, so retaining hardly raised cash, which are exactly the elements that growing companies are looking at getting support on. And so that, in addition to the fact that One Nucleus is also a very strong network, having all this support and expertise within its group of members, but also in the wider network that they represent. We thought it was a really good opportunity to actually match the two, and you leveraging the One Nucleus offer and network to allow this growing company accessing the right expertise at the right time. So what could be this innovation, Virtual Innovation Center? So it's really about strengthening the foundation. All the big topics you are seeing here, they're the ones that are core to biotech development. So some of them, as I said, a bit more operational around recruiting staff at all levels, or finding facilities or lab space, but others a bit more strategic and thinking about next strategic move or next fundraising phases. And so it will really be about supporting on these aspects. But if we take, for example, internationalization, it will be more the hands-on support to it. So if it's about interest in the US, it won't be about raising awareness of the potential of US markets, because at this stage they will know. It will be more about conducting your IP due diligence there, or finding the right investment contacts there. So it really more tailored and focused, but also it will be for the ones who have this interest, because they may not be all interested in that, or they may not all be at this stage at that time. And that bespoke approach is actually what we think is key for the growing company. So how that's going to be delivered? Well, it will be a program, because otherwise it will just be the general One Nucleus benefits. So a program based on 12 months, again, flexibility on when this program starts. There will be opportunity for joining during the 12 months, so on a rolling way. But also, as I said, it will be providing this precision support. And I stole Tony's expression on that, but equivalent of bespoke is really to understand the needs of the companies because they don't have the same at the same time. And then supporting the right, providing the right expertise that matches that. So there will be a backbone program to that with some workshops because some theme will be quite common to companies growing. And so they will have this general interest and workshop dedicated to this specific area, as I mentioned earlier. But it will also be opportunity for one-to-one sessions with experts on areas they feel they need more support. And then importantly, because, well, we live more in a virtual world and also because a growing company is probably more likely to be busy with all this operational question or building on the next strategic step. So it would be to have resources available to them for using if they wish. So it could be access to intelligence, to databases, or to efforts, because obviously that's a big part on how to raise awareness and find the next business development opportunity, for example. And then obviously One Nucleus can support with that, but we're still a small team with, yes, expertise on some aspects, but not all of them. But what we have is a network, and a network of really good expertise and support for companies in that respect. So that's the whole point, is leveraging the network. And that's probably where One Nucleus is good at and well placed to support the companies with. So we're delighted to have a range of our existing partners who are involved in this Virtual Innovation Center to support this, to provide this expertise and then support the companies with the program that we are developing. So now the who. So you probably got that this is mainly aimed for the growing biotech companies. So the criteria of minimum of 12 months post-incorporation, but that's mainly to reflect on the fact that it's, yes, for companies while looking at the next step in their development. It's mainly for primary business focus on internal or R&D or R&D services, because again, the support with lab space or lab staff recruitment is probably good strength and something we feel we're well positioned to support with. Being a One Nucleus Gold member, I think it's just to reflect on the fact that we want companies to be part of the network and feel that they belong to it. So maybe to benefit from it in the first place, but then when they will be in a position to give back as well. So it's really to strengthen this network opportunity. And it shouldn't be a limiting factor. And actually, I'd like to remind our Science Park partners that their tenants can get a free first year of gold membership with One Nucleus. So it could be a really good opportunity to leverage that. And no geographic restrictions. There's no reason why we couldn't support a company that is not UK based, but still want to access expertise here or have access to the network. So it's open. Who widely, so not benefiting from it, but being involved? Well, that's anyone. So we're always looking for good support. It's an initiative that, yes, is for the network, but also with the network. So I mentioned the partners we're working closely with, but any individual contribution, I'm very happy to discuss. And I think the best way to do that is just to get in touch with me. So you've seen me, Aline, and that's my email address. So I hope that sort of clarified what we're trying to do. Very excited about that. And I think to justify such initiative, it's always good to have the ones involved in growing companies or supporting growing companies to discuss the challenges of that and how that can support. So without further ado, I'd like to invite to the floor, or should I say to the webcam, because this is the world we're living in, our wonderful panel today. We're all very experienced in growing companies or in supporting life science companies, and we'll develop a bit on these challenges they faced and how that can be supported better. So I'm going to leave it to Rowan, your chair today, who I'm sure will be an excellent job in that. So Rowan, all over to you.
Thank you, Aileen, and delighted to have the opportunity to be made to look very good by an excellent panel that we have today. My name's Rowan Gardner. I can see a lot of familiar names on today's grouping online. So this is interactive. I'm expecting very good questions from you, and type them into the chat window. I'm a serial entrepreneur, advisor, occasional angel investor, and a founder of Precision Life. So I welcome Aileen's concept of precision support for these companies. And because this is the first session in the series, the panel have prepared a few thoughts across those three corners that Aileen talked about in her introduction. So we'll talk about technology, funding, and the challenge of people as we scale companies. So I'm going to start by asking the panel to introduce themselves and the organization. And for ease, I'm going to take them in alphabetical order. So AJ, if you would unmute, please introduce yourself.
No problem. Thanks, Rowan, and thanks to One Nucleus for the invitation, the opportunity to speak with everyone today. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so to introduce myself, I'm Ayakumi Ajedamobi, but most folks call me AJ for short. I'm the Venture Development Manager at BioCity. For those who don't know, BioCity is the largest bioincubator in the UK, and we run an integrated model of venture development, investment, and incubation, which I can talk about a little bit later on. In terms of my background, PhD in clinical medicine, I made a very quick pivot out of academia into the world of startups, initially in business development for a corporate-backed life sciences accelerator. And then as head of next generation sequencing for Desktop Genetics, which was a successfully exited VC-backed startup applying machine learning and CRISPR genome editing, and happy to talk about some of the challenges and experiences of that. And as I mentioned, I now am Venture Development Manager at BioCity, where I work with founders to build breakthrough life science and healthcare ventures. So that's me.
Thank you, AJ. That's a great summary. Benjamina, can I ask you to introduce yourself and your organization?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So I'm Benjamina. I'm the founder and CEO of Higher Stakes. We're a cultivated meat company. So for those of you who don't know what cultivated meat is a way of taking any cells from the animal, which we grow and then guide to become other types of tissue that you need to recreate meat that's a lot more sustainable, both for our planet, but also for our health and better for the animals. We're based out of Cambridge and focusing on pork. My background's in chemical engineering, did some work in 3D printing, fragrance and flavoring, was the lead software developer of a startup, and then started my own company.
Fantastic, Benjamina. And these are globally significant businesses that we're going to be growing. So delighted to have someone from outside the UK contributing. Bjorn, welcome in. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Great, yes. So I'm the Swede in this panel. My name is Björn Arvidsson, and I'm the Managing Director for Stunts Life Science. And we're actually based in Uppsala in Sweden, and Uppsala is located approximately 80 kilometers north of Stockholm, the capital. And Stunts is an abbreviation, and it's a foundation for the collaboration between the public sector, the academia, and the industry. And we were founded by the county, the region, the municipality, both our universities and the industry represented by the Chamber of Commerce in our board and management team. We have our governor as a chair of the board, and aside from life science, we also have a focus on environmental issues and energy issues, as well as sustainable society development. My own background is in product management, business development, market access, and policy-related questions, public affairs within diagnostics and pharma. I'm a chemist by trade, and I have a PhD in analytical chemistry. And as for the ecosystem in Uppsala, we have more than 100 companies within life science, and we're approximately 18% of the Swedish life science, even though we only have 2% of the total population. We have our own program to support companies. Stunsa is one of the actors in the innovation system, but we have one program called BioX. We have been over 10 years, we have 70 companies being part of that process, so to say. And the kind of return of invest for them, according to their own testimony, is between 4 to 8 times over 2 years. So it's kind of a successful process, I have to say. So, and thank you for inviting me to this discussion.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Bjorn, to have Uppsala represented, which has such a long-standing tradition in life science. Next, Jason. Where's Jason? Please introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about Start Codon.
Thanks, Rowan, and thanks everyone for having me. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Start Codon. We're a new fund and accelerator based in Cambridge here in the UK. We are looking to help young healthcare startup companies in therapeutics, diagnostics, digital health, medtech get off the ground with investment and guidance. We have the support of backers like Roche and Genentech and Novartis and several other pharma and biotechs. And it's really great to be a part of this ever-expanding ecosystem. My personal background is I originally moved to the UK to do my PhD in cardiovascular medicine, the molecular biology focus, made my way through tech transfer into Cambridge Epigenetics, where I was CEO and led to fundraisers. And I'm now trying to pay it forward and help the next generation of founders get started.
Fantastic, Jason. And lastly, Ryan, not least, because your name begins with an R as well. Ryan, welcome. Can you introduce yourself and your organization, please? Oh, you're on mute.
That would help. That's like the word of, the saying of 2021 as well as 2020, right? So hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Bethencourt. I am the CEO and founder of Wild Earth, now the leading plant-based pet food company in the US and India, interestingly enough. Prior to starting Wild Earth, I co-founded IndieBio, which is probably more relevant to the majority of people here. Co-founded and led it with my fellow co-founders. We invested in over 80 companies there. Market cap of those companies now is about $3.2 billion, which, from everything from future of food all the way through to regenerative medicine, cancer therapeutics. My mission is to help accelerate the future of food and biotech. And so since then, I'm also a partner at Babel Ventures, which invests in consumer biotech. And I've recently started a micro VC. I personally cut angel checks, and the micro VC is called Sustainable Food Ventures. And we invest globally through the AngelList rolling platform. We've actually invested in 2 UK companies. In Q4 of 2020, we started the fund and invested in 19 companies globally. So Africa, Europe, South America, North America, and Asia as well. And so, the aim is here. I actually met Tony many years ago, about 20 years ago when I was in Cambridge. Back then I was working for Quintiles and I was in drug development. My mission is I'm actually a British citizen as well, which is interesting. I'm an American and British citizen, and I have a huge love for the UK, and I want to help support the UK in any way that I can. And life sciences is one area, and so I'm happy to help with advice and sharing insights, and hopefully helping to build more companies in the UK as well. Total number of companies that I've invested in now, including angel investment, venture, and actually co-built, about 135 companies in the last 8 years.
That's quite a track record. Well done, Ryan. And certainly the increasing interest in the future of food and sustainable agriculture is a really important sort of new lane for biotech businesses. And the pet food must be excellent, because the moment you mentioned it, my cat arrived on my desk. So you potentially got another customer there, I think.
We're working on cell-based for cats, so that's in the future. That's in the future, not hopefully about a year or so.
Well, I think you've got a potential customer here that's willing to do early trials. So with that, what I wanted to do was sort of move on to the sort of first corner. I can see some great questions popping up in the chat, but I'm going to start by asking the panel really, that technology base, the applications of biotechnology are widening, and really sharing the benefits of your expertise. The question I would like to ask you is really, what do you know now that you would have liked to have known at the beginning of starting your company? So again, I'm going to take it in alphabetical order just for ease. So AJ, perhaps you could share some thoughts on that, please.
Sure, happy to. So I guess a little bit of context is usually good to start off these things. I think now is a really great time for biotech startups and biotech innovation, and it's really driven by a couple of factors that I see. The first is an information revolution, this convergence of new technologies and biology, which is kind of facilitating an increased understanding of biology. So I'm thinking of things like AI and omics and genome editing, which is an area that I'm really versed in, or well versed in, and remote diagnostics. So you've got that caveat, or you've got that element. I see the cat has made an appearance. The second is investor confidence. I think a lot more investors are looking at the biotech ecosystem as an area for getting really good returns. And people are getting more comfortable with deploying capital, particularly when the initial capital amounts to get off the ground aren't as large as they used to be, right? So the proliferation of incubators and accelerators and these great support ecosystems and innovation centers means that these companies can get off the ground a lot cheaper, which is great. The third is, from a biopharma perspective, there's been a lot of restructuring. So the market's starting to really concentrate. And they're outsourcing a lot of their innovation, and Start Codon's, potentially a great example of that. To see Roche and Genentech getting involved. Then the fourth is regulatory innovation. So we're seeing a lot more in the way. I mean, all we have to look at is the last 10 months of the world we've been in terms of the amount of innovation going into regulatory approvals and how we can bring new therapies and new discoveries to market a lot quicker. So that context, I think, is good for the audience to kind of get to grips with the idea that it's a great time to be building biotech startups. In terms of what are the challenges, or what I wish I'd known at the start that I know now, is that just because you have a great technology, and I'm sure this is going to be mirrored by many people, just because you have a great technology doesn't mean it's guaranteed success. And the challenge for a lot of startups is understanding where their platforms, a lot of them are platform technologies, where their platforms can find application, right? And where they can build that repeatable, scalable, and profitable business model. So it's the sort of translation of that into a commercial engine. And that requires a lot of focus. Briefly, there was a company that I supported that was developing a novel assay for DNA damage detection. And they had 19 different applications for their technology, right? And it was exciting, right? I mean, you look at all the amazing places that we can apply this and put this into. But that's not how you build a business. Business requires focus. And for them, it was finding, the application where the need was the greatest, the market was sufficiently large to put venture into, and they had a real pliable way of transacting with that market. There was a way to actually, derive revenue from that. So I'll stop there because I've spoken a lot, but those are my thoughts.
That's great, AJ. So moving on, Benjamina. So, you've been growing CEO of High Stakes for a while now. What have you learned, and what do you know now that you wish you had known at the beginning?
I think it's something not even just that I think that is something that I constantly remind myself. So even once you know it, you really have to constantly remind yourself, is to keep things simple and really think about the end goal. One of our advisors gave us a little tip where basically every time you try to scale something complicated, you should bang your head against the wall. And that's what it's going to feel like to really scale it. And I'll give an example. We're looking at bioreactor technologies, and we found one that had proven a lot for the type of cells that we were using and worked really great at small scale. But the moment we started questioning them about how would we scale this to tens of thousands of liters, I mean, they had no idea how they would go about it. They were talking 5-6 years to even get there. And quickly you start realizing then this is not a technology that we could count on. And this is not something that we could bring forward. So I think it's quite easy to get excited by a lot of really cool technologies that work at small scale. But particularly for companies like ourselves that really do need scale to make something marketable. We really have to keep the end goal in mind, and the simpler it is, the better it is. And I think counterintuitively as well, a bit reflecting what AJ was saying. Sometimes you want to complicate things because it makes you invent things and it's a cooler technology. But actually the simpler and the easier, the simpler it is, the easier it will be to scale and the better business you will have.
Benjamina, that's a really kind of excellent example of moving from that R&D mindset into the translational mindset. So thank you for that. Bjorn, as you look through your ecosystem, what's some of the tips you can give would-be CEOs on technology planning and thinking?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm not the entrepreneur myself. I'm more of a looking for the system transformation. I'm looking for gaps in the system. I'm trying to take care of the whole ecosystem to make it a good ecosystem for companies to grow in. I see a few things. First, I would like to mention that what I call the internal versus the external environments. And I think many organizations focus all too much on the internal factors for success, actually. While we all know that the external forces always have a larger impact on the internal focuses. And thus often the internal focus becomes a sub-optimization. And I think for all of us, the pandemic reminded us about this last year when everything we thought we had planned for were thrown out the window, and when the corona woke us up last year. So I think look more for the external factors and look into both the arena where you are in your market, but also on a more international scale as well, what's happening. I think too many companies, especially those coming directly from universities or academia, just being entrepreneurs, coming up with it, they're too focused on their technology in general and not about the environment they're acting in. I think that's one thing. The other thing is closely related to what AJ said, and I call it kind of a bookkeeping. And I think that you should never wait with the regulations or administration like record keeping or putting a kind of infrastructure in place for how you will work with regulatory questions. I think it's super important to build that from the beginning, not to be too cumbersome after a while. And we also know that the trend is that we see more and more regulations coming. I myself have a background in pharma, and how much regulations there are there. But we also will see that within medtech, and we will see that in diagnostics and so on as well. So never forget that this is super important. I think also coming back to some of the points mentioned is that also everything related to data, any kind of e-health or digital health and so on will also be strongly regulated, especially in Europe, so to say. I think another thing to think about also is are you a one-trick pony, or how do you develop your second product or solution? Because I also think that large companies have realized since 10 years back that they need strong partnering organizations and licensing organizations, and they realize that instead of just acquiring companies, they are going into more partnerships. It's quite obvious that they have their tentacles everywhere in the world and looking for this. And if you are just a one-trick pony, there's a larger chance that if you have an interesting technology or IP, that they just acquire it and they move it from your ecosystem and so on. And for me, I would like to, of course, be a bit protective about the ecosystem I'm in. So hopefully I can also have strong companies that they have a lot of intellectual capacity in the system. That means that even if they are acquired or go into more of a partnership deal, they will stay in Uppsala or in Sweden at least, and grow from there. And I think that's super important. But also, how do you find your second product or solution? Because it's often, a small company, they often, focus too much on what they already have, while they should plan for the future. So that's a few of the takeaways there.
So you got lots of advice there, and I think just a couple of things I would just amplify. So, in the UK, we've just lived through the public university commercial partnership that has put the AstraZeneca vaccine on market in record time. There was a lot of innovation in regulations, and Diane Lee has just asked a question about, looking towards the regulatory and development environment to possibly make the UK more competitive, and certainly the speed with which some of the vaccine trials were done in the UK, I think, is a brilliant example of that. I'm not sure we're going to have time to dig into that question, Diane, but I'm calling it out because I'd like Aileen to perhaps think of that as a future subject for the virtual incubator. So Jason, You know, looking back at Cambridge Epigenetics, which was a really interesting business, because I think it picked up on some of those themes that Bjorn was just mentioning. So having bringing to bear that experience, what tips and what would you like to know then that you knew at the end of the process would you like to share with some of the entrepreneurs?
Oh yeah, so many things to share. So it was an exciting story for me to be a part of Cambridge Epigenetics from the early days. So I was employee number 3. It was myself and 2 scientists. And so basically it fell on my shoulders to do everything that wasn't bench work, which was trial by fire. And I would say that that's kind of a common experience for most startups. So you have to do so much in the early days that you get used to wearing multiple hats, but that's not sustainable. So I think as soon as possible, you need to start implementing processes and start planning your team building and team skill upskilling so that you can actually grow and scale. It's not just the technology that you implement, it's also the processes that you put in place from day one. We were selling kits to the research market, and then we pivoted towards developing diagnostic tests using the same technology. And that was a massive seismic change in what we had originally had envisioned versus what we had planned for. So from day one, we had an ambition to go towards more clinical applications, but we thought that selling to the research market would help give us insights, and it did, and tell us what we thought the highest value play for our technology would be, which was perfect. And then as soon as we decided what that was, it was kind of like overnight, we had to go from developing kits to sell to academics into a diagnostics biomarker development company. Massive change. But all along the way, we had the foresight that someday we would get there, but we didn't really put the planning from day one. And so I would always tell people that you have to go on your journey. You have to have the ability to pivot in new directions and be agile. But if you put the foundations in early on, that gives you more optionality in the future, you'll be in a better position to actually take advantage of all that market research and the need or ability to move into different markets or different directions. So just to kind of echo some of the sentiments that came before, figure out both from a technical standpoint, but also an operational standpoint, what you need to future-proof yourself and give you that foundation. Always be open to that pivot and make sure that you have a team that has the skills required to move forward and you're constantly upskilling them. I think in biotech, we spend too much time focused on tech as opposed to products and solutions. I think we don't put enough emphasis on the teams behind these companies as well. Your team is everything, because technologies come and go. And the most successful companies I've seen in our space, they may start with technology X, but they don't end up there. They end up bringing in whatever solutions they need to develop the products that address the unmet needs they've identified, but also to help their company continue to be successful. That could be acquisition, it could be in-licensing, it could just be pure execution. So let's not overemphasize the tech, particularly if you're a young startup today. You might have a great idea today and a great platform today, that's great. Flip it on its head. Think about the problem that you're solving and what's the best way to solve it, and do that.
Absolutely, that sort of skate to where the puck's going to be, and train to be the ice hockey player that can skate the fastest across the ice. Very much a sort of a really important thought. So Ryan, only 130 odd companies to draw upon for this answer, so it's going to be a cracking answer.
Yeah, so I'll start with the philosophical point, right? Because I think this is actually, I mean, you know, at scale, you start to see trends in things. And so I'll start first with, you know, when you're building a company, where and what should you build, right? Like, this is a question that I think a lot of founders experience. And my general advice to founders over, I mean, you know, I've talked with hundreds of founding teams, funded, you know, 135 plus. Always go for the 10x problem, not the 10% improvement problem, right? So it's going to be almost as hard to raise money to build a team to go after something that's 10x better than 10% better or 20% better. It turns out no one actually cares, right? You have a diagnostic that's 10, 20% better, no one cares. No one actually cares. And so even though it feels daunting to go after these really, really hard 10x problems, if you unlock that, the amount of value and the amount of excitement you're going to unlock is just so much more powerful. And so, you know, from a meta perspective, that's where I would start first, right? Like, when you're thinking about building this company, don't go after something that's just a little improvement. It's going to be a horrible journey. You're going to be trying desperately to raise money. No one's going to get excited. You're going to struggle to build a team, raise money, go for something really hard. If you unlock that, it's going to be huge potentially. And then, you know, from a personal perspective, so I'll talk about building and scaling Wild Earth. So I took Wild Earth from an idea. We were actually using alternative proteins. So we use fungi as our primary protein source. So we use yeast as an alternative to meat. It's a high protein, it's 40% protein, a good steak's about 30% protein. We call it plant-based because the consumer doesn't understand that fungi are an entirely different kingdom of life. The general consumer just doesn't understand that. We had to learn this, by the way. Every stage of a company is absolutely brutal, right? When you move through different stages, so when you go from idea stage to science stage, to product stage, to commercial, like launch commercial stage, you're at the beginning, not the end. The moment you make a product, it's the start of that journey, not the end. And so I think most of us in the past, you know, spend time on the science and getting the product right. And, you know, the market's going to be there when we need it. And it's not. The general consensus the market in general will not care, right? The market will not care, and it's up to you to make the market care. And so, you know, as you become a commercial stage company, Wild Earth is a commercial stage company. We grew about 10x our revenue last year versus 2019. Absolutely brutal. And what does brutal mean? It means putting targets on to people, holding them accountable for delivering. Some people cannot learn, like some people cannot scale. It's just not in them to scale. And that means you need to let them go, and you need to hire new people. They can't scale, you let them go as well. And so like, this is what it looks like as you continue to scale. You know, everyone talks about wanting to scale big businesses and build. What it looks like from the inside is actually pretty brutal. And you have to stay focused on like, what is the mission of the company? And there's some people who are great people who would be great to get you to your product, but are not going to be with you on the journey as you commercialize, or are great to launch the product, but can't scale a product. And so, you know, just be ready for that journey, and be ready that literally anyone, including yourself, can be removed from the company if they can't learn and scale.
So Ryan, you've really set me up for the people question, which I think, yeah, there's a lot of comments in the chat window that really are supporting the criticality of the right team at the right time for the right point in the journey. So, yeah, the real question is, you know, what are your top tips for building the kick-ass team that scales? I raise money from a West Coast investors, so it would be kick-ass. And you know, what are your top tips there? AJ, come on, how do you build that team that takes you all the way to exit?
It's really simple. No, it's not. It's incredibly complex. It's you know, there's no systemic or systemized way of doing it or operational way of doing it. The first thing I would say though is you want to it starts with building a network, I think. You know, good people attract good people. Talent migrates to talent. And, you know, the bigger your network, and, you know, to plug the event that we're on today, Innovation Center, you know, the bigger network and the better connected you are to places where talent can get concentrated, the easier it becomes to spot people that can be advantageous to your growth. So I think that's really important. I think Ryan hit on a bunch of really good points in terms of, you know, being prepared to make difficult decisions, you know, because you know, you're going to interview people, you're going to think they're a perfect fit, you're going to bring them on board, and you know, for one reason or another, they may not work out. You know, scaling a high growth, high value company is a real it's a thrill ride, but it's not for everyone, right? It's not suited for everyone. So you're going to have to be able to make hard decisions, but be able to do that, you know, quickly, right? And be able to take those decisions at
AJ,
speed. Yep.
AJ, I was just going to say, when you said the thrill ride, it's like the ups and then the frightening down. Right?
Exactly.
Like, let's get everyone, like, let's get real with everyone. It's like you're going to like crash through the floor and like it's going to be horrific. Like that's how it feels. And then the next day it's beautiful. And then you have like this amazing upward, and then you're back like that. That's how it feels.
Absolutely.
And I would just say, as I call on Benjamina, you have to do all that and lead a company with a certain amount of grace. So be swimming across the lake like the proverbial swan, and not worrying at the state of the water and what's going on underneath. Benjamina, what are your tips, and how are you thinking about this as you plan the growth of higher stakes?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is that for good people, you really, I mean, especially at the early stages, you're the one that really has to sell. So I think there's this image that, you're interviewing, people need to sell to you. But I think for good people, and before your company is well known and you become, a Google, you're the one that really needs to sell to them why they should join you. I think to reflect on kind of what was said before is also, it's not a family. The choice is in both ways. So if people choose to be there, and you can stay friends, but if it's not the right person, you're out. And it needs to be, in both way, a conscious choice that we're working together. And I think the last thing, it sounds obvious, but really thinking about diversity, and this is from all aspects. And I think that's, I think there's the obvious ones, women, men, nationality, race, all of that everyone thinks about. But I think also thinking, I mean, we have, for example, quite a good mixture of seniority and juniors. So we have people that just finished their PhD, people with 30 years of experience, and thinking about how they work together and making sure that you get as well different aspects and different stages, so that also as a business you de-risk. I mean, the way I see it is de-risking, because the more you have different opinions, the more you're de-risked. And again, as Ryan said, sometimes you're in the wrong phase. So if you already have some people that have gone through that phase, that can help, but also the right amount of people that can bring you on the up and come up with new ideas and have the energy to go through.
Absolutely, that's great, Benjamina. And I'm keeping an eye on the chat window. And Martin says hire on values as well, not just skills. And I think that is just a really very, very important thought. So Bjorn, talk to me a little bit about the importance of culture here in building that resilience so companies can scale, and what you see in Uppsala.
Yeah, sure. First, I would like to comment that, in Sweden, the unions are very strong, which means that letting people go is a difficult thing to do. So you need to be careful in hiring, or what you do, or what kind of contracts you have. But I think this is a super important issue because of course you want the right person in the right place in the right time, so to say. And I think also we see more and more life science companies moving into what tech has been doing for a long time, and that is to share competences. And to be able to do that, you can have people for just a few percentage of the time because what they're specialized at or the kind of expert they are. And it's okay for them to work for several companies in the same ecosystem. And that was not the case just a few years back. And then you need to work a lot with the culture and the kind of a secrecy problem in the culture to make sure that, people are understand that this is not a problem if you're moving fast enough and so on. I think that's kind of interesting. To have more virtual organizations where you have just a few people as a backbone, and then you have a lot of resources around the system. And as an ecosystem also, we need to make sure then, from my part, to have a lot of great consultants, a sharing community, this less focus on secrecy and so on in the system, but also that you can have, large companies sharing their knowledge with smaller companies and so on for the greater good of the ecosystem, being able to attract talents and investors and such things. I think also if we look to the trend that we see in life science, and also from the experience from the other panelists, is that the digital transformation of life science is as big as this in any other sector, which means also that we will have a war on competences from tech and IT. And if every sector everywhere in the world is competing for the same competences, how can we make life science to be attractive for these competences, actually, if we need them as much as they do in other sectors to be able to grow? I think that's super important. And then just one thing as well, also coming back to the right person in the right place, is that often we see in our ecosystem that people come directly from academia or as a researcher, and they start their own company, and they are definitely, or most often, not the right person to actually scale the company or to commercialize things. And to make sure that they understand that and have good talents in the system that actually could be do this for them, you know, in a trustworthy way, I think is super important to make sure that we have.
So lots of things there, and the competencies Veckling is something I remember from living in Sweden. That idea of developing the competence in the team. So Jason, as you, if I can turn to you, can you talk to me about that kick-ass team, but perhaps, you know, with a view on the board and externally, not just within the business?
Happy to, Rowan. That's actually the point I wanted to raise. So I'm glad that you asked me that question. It's not just the people that you employ. I think there are two things that we have to keep in mind, especially if you are a first-time CEO, first-time founder, co-founders of your startup. Is one, you've got to let the right ones in, which I think is actually a Swedish film, but that's incidental. VCs can be a bit like vampires, but you've got to let the friendly vampire in as opposed to the unfriendly one. So you've got to choose wisely, which means that you've got to figure out who's value add, like who strategically is going to help you build your company, who's going to set you up for bringing in the capital from follow-on investment, or maybe follow on their own investment so you can scale the business, who will be able to actually credibly advise you on the best way for you to set the foundations, build your own team, etc. So this, your non-exec directors, is bringing in the right chairs, bringing in the right investors at the right time for the right stage of your business, and ones who have your interest and importantly, the business's best interest objectively at heart. And I want to build on that because the other aspect of this is you have to be very self-aware. It's very easy for us to sit here, and if you're a CEO, founder, and you're the one responsible for the vision and building the team and all the, the wonderful speeches and going to panels and all these amazing things that we get to do. Isn't that great? And you build a team. And so it's very easy for us to think that somehow we're always right. And you have to have that self-awareness and that reflection to say, actually, am I doing the right thing? Am I hiring the right team? Am I going to be the right CEO forever for this company? Maybe I'm the right person to lead things in this phase of growth, but I need to be thinking about what's going to be required for the next phase of growth. And maybe I might be the ideal CEO now, but I might not be the ideal CEO in the future. Or to Bjorn's point, maybe I'm an academic and I'm best suited to be CTO, CSO, maybe a consultant on the SAB, not necessarily the CEO of this company. That self-awareness is key. And the last thing you would ever want is for your board of august, experienced advisors to be having a conversation saying that actually the problem with the team is you. So do keep that in mind. It's not just the people that you employ, it's also being self-aware of your own limitations, the gaps in your understanding, where you shine, where you can improve, and also maybe where you have fundamental limitations that would be better in a timely fashion to hand over the reins to somebody else, as opposed to us as investors having to have that awkward conversation with you.
That's a great point, Jason. Ryan, do you have anything to add on building that kick-ass team?
No, I mean, Jason's point is exactly right. As a scientist, I never was into the humanities or philosophy or anything like that. And suddenly, when I started building companies, I realized how important a framework for thinking is. And so I started to devour philosophical texts and thoughts on life, on reality, how you make decisions, how you know right and wrong, like all these gray areas that, especially as scientists, we don't really get taught these frameworks for thinking, right? And so, I think that, Jason's perspective is 100% on point, like awareness and the ability to question everything and to have frameworks for asking questions is incredibly important. One thing that I would add to building teams, and this is something that I've increasingly been doing, is, as you hire someone and as you start to scale a business, we have about 22 people at Wild Earth. So I have a lot of managers now. I mostly manage managers. But when I'm interviewing people who I'm managing, the question I always ask myself is, one, can I manage this person? Can I work with this person? And would I enjoy working with this person? Two, do I believe they can deliver on what needs to be delivered over the next 6 months? And then three, can I fire this person if they don't deliver? Right? And so literally in the interview, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, and I'm very honest with them. I basically say, look, this is what we're bringing you in to do. If you don't hit these milestones, or at least come close to it, we will probably have to part ways, and I will be the one to let you go. And I just want to be really upfront with people the way that it's going to go, and then that's it. And so it's an uncomfortable conversation. And I think when you're building businesses, you should always have the uncomfortable conversations up front, right? I think for all of us, we've had to learn it the hard way. If you don't deal with something that's a problem, immediately the moment you see it, it festers and it becomes worse. And so from the moment I interview someone, I let them know what are the terms of their engagement and what are the terms of which I will let them go.
So I think that's a really valuable point, and it's not an easy one to hear, but that setting expectations and not avoiding the difficult conversation is really important. My reflection on this is, firstly, kudos for being the entrepreneur and pointing out that Higher Stakes is hiring. So if you want an opportunity, there's a link in the in the chat box. Well done, Benjamina. I think there's sort of four pieces of it that I think of it. I think one is, as a CEO who wants to be part of the journey, make sure you create some time and space to develop yourself. Get a coach and actually invest in your own development. And then I think it's the internal. We had some great tips on, building that culture that embraces diversity. Diversity is absolutely correlates with success. So avoid, the hiring in of people like you. It just won't get it done. The individual doesn't scale, and clones of yourself will not scale. And then I think real importance on getting ahead of building out your board. Get the best in at board level that you can attract and access the network, and build that bench of advisors that will be ready to help the business through the next step of growth. And we've got very little time left, but I do want to address financing, particularly as we've got AJ on the call and everyone else who's actively raising and investing money. So the key thing, as we sort of go out and raise money, and there's more capital out there than ever before for this sector, is how do you approach fundraising, and how do you engage effectively with the friendly vampires, as Jason calls it? After I've dabbed some garlic on my neck, AJ, what's the next thing I do?
It's a little disconcerting to be seen as a friendly vampire, but I look at investing as there are three things you've got to get right. One is know your audience, right? So have it really clearly identified who you're going after and why, and doing the research and doing the homework in terms of, what areas they invest in, what stage they invest in, when did they last raise a fund. That often gives you a sense of their appetite for investing if they've recently raised a new fund. Have they published blogs or done webinars where they talk about their investment approach, things like that, right? You got to do your research, know your audience, number one. Number two is you got to craft a compelling story, right? The universe may be made of atoms, but as humans, we perceive it through storytelling. And, human beings transact with human beings, right? People transact with people. So emotion plays a role in this as well. What are their areas of interest, and how do I tell a story that captures their imagination, as well as, obviously delivering on ROI. And then finally, the third thing is make a good first impression. Investors get a ton of people coming at them looking for capital. You only get one chance to make a good first impression. If you make a bad first impression, that can have pretty significant downstream effects. So, perfect your pitch, practice it, and make sure when you're put in front of an investor, you're making a good first impression. Those are my 3 top tips.
Brilliant. Benjamina, what are your top tips? You're in a very competitive space where your competitors have raised a truckload of capital.
I would say 2 things. One, around momentum, and I think something counterintuitively, sometimes you just want to say everything that you've done and explain things, but actually sometimes just before you hit that big milestone, actually don't go fundraising when you've hit that big milestone. Go a little bit before, like a month before, and they'll feel actually, oh, you've achieved this in a week, even though it might have taken you even a year or something to do it. And if you go just before the time when you're achieving that big milestone, you get the momentum and you keep going. So I think that's one thing that we didn't do in the beginning, and that no one really, we found not people don't talk about enough. And it's really the timing when you talk to people and when you actually say the things you achieve, because they will have that impression. And I would say the second thing is determination. So we found it really difficult to raise our seed round, and had to talk to so many people. But it ended up working out, right? And sometimes you only need one person, and that one person will bring momentum, and then everyone wants to invest. And, you know, I mean, our seed round took 1.5 years to get done, and now we're doing a seed extension, and it's double the size of our seed round, and we did it in 2 weeks. So I think it's just determination, and if things are tough, it is the way it is, and just keep going. And, you know, there's a lot of money in the world. Until you've reached out to every single person that you think could be good, you haven't done your job as a CEO. So yes, focus in the beginning and try and go to the best, but also, you know, if it doesn't work out, just keep going until you find a way to get your company floating.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. You know, that determination is key. Bjorn, what's the story in Sweden for funding right now?
Oh yeah, what's the story? No, but I have a few ideas of how to approach this as well. And I also would use the word momentum actually. As an ecosystem also, we would use the word momentum for attractiveness, because it could be that one company is successful in, you know, getting funding or financing, which means that it has a spillover effect on other companies as well, because especially with external investors. If a lot of it, you know, attention is raised towards Uppsala, then of course, you know, they will look into other companies as well. And I think that's super important to look at. I think also, you know, this is a speculation market. So as a reality check, you know, always remember that, you know, private funding, they don't care about, you know, sentimental values often, or cool technology. They think about return on invest, you know, and how a product or company as fast as possible can provide more money into new investments. So I think that's it's good to remember, especially for first-time entrepreneurs. And as a third thing, I think, you know, in our kind of business, I think health technology assessment and health economic evaluations is underestimated as well. It will come much more, especially in European markets, where we will look into, you know, the kind of value it brings instead of the cost pressure that it will provide, especially on healthcare and so on, if you have that kind of product. So I think, you know, do a very good evaluation with good consultants in the beginning of your journey, I think.
Fantastic. Jason, as a friendly vampire, what are your top tips?
Well, I would say that if you can, get a warm introduction. Warm introductions, I think, are always the best. Reach out to your network, find someone who knows someone who knows someone, because a lot of investment actually comes down to emotions and trust. And if you're introduced to somebody cold versus being introduced by a warm introduction where they already have a connection, you're far more likely to get their attention and statistically more likely to secure the investment. That's just the nature of the beast. It's not purely spreadsheets and calculations. A lot of it is network and those kind of that trust that people have. The other aspect is that this isn't rocket science. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go into it. But if you have that self-awareness I was mentioning earlier, and you look at your gaps, you might have an amazing technology, but you might need to bring in advisors who have a track record of fundraising, who really understand the space, who can make investors feel more comfortable. And then finally, again, to reemphasize, find the friendly vampires. Find the ones who are going to protect you when the werewolves come and attack.
Excellent. Ryan, are you a friendly vampire?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm a werewolf or a vampire. I guess it depends who's asking, right?
So what are your tips for engaging well with you?
You know, I think it's all about, at the early stage, it's all about the story, right? So I think a lot of founders make mistakes in thinking it's about the pitch deck or even warm intros. I agree that warm intros are good, but like ultimately, if you have a vision that you want to create in the world, you've got to do whatever it takes to make it happen. That might mean grinding. That might mean cold. If you don't know anyone, like you might just have to start doing cold outreach, but you have to be aware of the stories that you're telling. You have to understand when you reach out to someone, what do they care about? What do they invest in? Like what are their drivers? And so I would say that at the earliest stages, the most important thing is story. And there is someone out there that if you have the right story, you're going to be able to convince to put that first check in. And so, you know, sometimes I'm the vampire, sometimes I'm the werewolf, I guess. So, you know, I can see it from both sides of this. And so if you truly have something that burns within your mind and you need to create it, don't allow anyone to stop you, right? Give yourself permission to go after it no matter what. And it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to pay a price for it, and it'll be a brutal price.
So I thank you for that, Ryan. Friendly vampires and werewolves, I'm always the witch. And I would say, capital story fit is as important as product market fit. So that piece of AJ saying doing with the research is key. And I will tell you that I did the first round in Ozo in 6 weeks, 3 pitches, 2 term sheets. Not because I'm clever, but because we had tuned that investment case to the audience. And they have funded the next 3 businesses I've been involved with. Aileen and Tony, thank you very much for today. And actually everyone who's attended. There's been some phenomenal commentary in the chat window. And Aileen, I think you've got a lot of material for the next of these next sessions that you're going to be hosting.
Yeah, far too many, but we'll be up for the challenges. And obviously, yeah, big thank you to you, Ron, for being a brilliant chair, as usual. I know panelists had lots to say, and they were very good in bringing their expertise into that, but it's just, canalizing, but the discussion is always a hard one. But thanks a lot, it was really good. And I hope we all keep in touch, because very excited about supporting more companies growing in the life science space.
Thank
everywhere.
Thank you, Aileen.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.